biggest stars in the world. He sang for presidents, sold millions of records, conquered Hollywood. But there was one thing he never had, one thing that haunted him every single day: his father's approval. Gaetano Crocetti was a quiet, tough Italian immigrant who never showed emotion, never said he was proud, never told Dean he believed in him. For 30 years, Dean lived with that silence. Until 1967, when Gaetano died. And what Dean found hidden in his father's barbershop revealed a truth that destroyed him and eventually saved him. But what nobody knew was that Gaetano had tried to tell him 3 times, and each time something stopped him. February 3rd, 1967. The call. 4 a.m., Beverly Hills. The phone rang in Dean Martin's mansion, cutting through the California darkness like a knife. Dean reached for it instinctively, his hand fumbling in the dark. After 30 years in show business, a 4 a.m. phone call meant one thing: bad news. "Mr. Martin?" The voice on the other end was professional, clinical. "This is Steubenville General Hospital. I'm calling about your father, Gaetano Crocetti." Dean's hand tightened around the phone. His throat closed. "Is he—" "I'm sorry, sir. He passed away about an hour ago. Heart attack. It was quick." Dean sat on the edge of his bed in Beverly Hills mansion, the phone pressed to his ear, and felt absolutely nothing. Not sadness, not grief, just emptiness. "Thank you for calling," Dean said quietly. "I'll be there as soon as I can." When he hung up, his wife, Jean, came into the room. "Dean, what happened?" "My father died," Dean said flatly. What was there to say? His father was gone, and with him went any chance of ever hearing the words Dean had waited his whole life to hear. What Dean didn't know: at that exact moment, 2,000 miles away in Steubenville, Ohio, a night nurse named Patricia Moretti was standing in Gaetano Crocetti's hospital room, holding a sealed envelope. She'd been on duty when Gaetano was brought in. She'd held his hand as he struggled to breathe, and she'd heard his last words: "Tell Dino, the shop, the drawer." Then he was gone. Patricia looked at the envelope in her hand. Gaetano had given it to her 2 weeks earlier during a routine checkup, made her promise to mail it to Dean if anything happened. She'd promised. But now, standing in the empty room, Patricia made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She put the envelope in her pocket and went home. She told herself she'd mail it in the morning. But by morning, she'd read about Dean's arrival in town. By afternoon, she'd heard he was at the house. By evening, she convinced herself it was too late, that showing up with a letter would be intrusive. The envelope stayed in her drawer for 3 years before she finally burned it, unable to bear the weight of what she'd failed to do. The flight home. The flight to Ohio was long and silent. Dean stared out the window, watching the clouds pass, remembering. He remembered being 7 years old, standing in his father's barber shop on South 6th Street, singing for the customers while his father cut hair. The men would clap and laugh, dropping coins into a jar for little Dino. But his father never smiled, never said, "Good job, son," just, "Go help your mother," in his thick Italian accent. He remembered being 17, telling his father he wanted to be a singer instead of a barber. His father had looked at him with those hard, dark eyes and said, "Singers don't eat, barbers eat." Then he'd turned back to his customer and never mentioned it again. He remembered 1946, when he'd gotten his first record deal with Capitol Records. Dean had driven all night from New York to Steubenville, walked into his father's barber shop with a contract in his hand. So proud, so excited. "Papa, look, I got a record deal, a real one. They're going to pay me to sing." His father had looked up from the customer whose hair he was cutting, glanced at the contract, then at Dean, then back to the hair. Good.
nothing else, just good. Dean had stood there holding his contract, feeling like a child who'd brought home a drawing that his father couldn't be bothered to look at. The pattern nobody saw. What Dean didn't remember, because he'd left too quickly, was what happened after he walked out of the shop that day in 1946. Gaetano had stood frozen for a full minute, scissors still in his hand. Then he'd excused himself to the back room, closed the door, and wept. His customer that day was Antonio Benedetti, who'd been getting his hair cut by Gaetano for 20 years. Years later, Antonio would tell his grandson, "I saw your great-grandfather cry only once in my life, the day his son became a star, and he couldn't tell him he was proud." "Why not?" the grandson asked. "Because in the old country you didn't say those things. You thought it would make your sons weak. You thought they needed to be tough, so you stayed tough, even when your heart was breaking." The house on North 7th Street. The funeral was scheduled for 2 days later. Dean spent the first day at his father's small house on North 7th Street, going through his belongings with his brother Bill and their mother Angela. The house was exactly as Dean remembered it, small, clean, modest. His father had lived alone here since Dean's mother moved in with Bill's family 5 years ago. "We should start packing things up," Bill said gently. "Decide what to keep, what to donate." Dean nodded numbly. They worked in silence for a while. Then his mother said something that made Dean stop. "Dino, you should go to the barber shop. Your father kept it all these years. Maybe there's something there you want." "The barber shop? I thought he closed it 20 years ago." "He did," Angela said, "but he never sold it. He'd still pay the rent every month. He'd go there sometimes, just to sit." Dean felt something twist in his chest. He kept paying rent on an empty barber shop for 20 years? His mother nodded. He said it was his place, where he started, where he raised you boys. He couldn't let it go. Angela's secret. What Angela didn't tell her sons was that she'd begged Gaetano to stop paying the rent. "It's $75 a month, Gaetano. We could use that money." "No," he'd always say. "That place is important." "Why? It's empty. Nobody goes there." And Gaetano would just shake his head. "I go there. That's enough." Angela had followed him once, 3 years ago, watched through the dusty window as her husband sat in his old barber chair, surrounded by yellowed newspapers, talking to himself in Italian. She'd heard him say, "Mio figlio è una stella." My son is a star. She walked away crying, understanding finally that the shop wasn't a business property, it was a shrine.
The letter. Dean looked down at the clippings in his lap. There were so many, hundreds. How many hours had his father spent cutting these out, organizing them, writing notes on them? And why? Why save them if he was never going to show them to Dean? Then Dean noticed something at the bottom of the drawer. A larger piece of paper, folded. He reached for it. It was a letter, written in his father's handwriting, dated January 15th, 1967, less than 3 weeks ago. Dean's hands trembled as he unfolded it. The letter was in English, his father's broken, heavily accented English, but English nonetheless. "Dino, if you find this, it mean I am gone. I write this because I am old now, and the doctor say my heart is no good. I need to tell you something I never say. I am proud. Every day I am proud. When I cut hair in this shop for 40 years, every customer I tell them, my son is Dean Martin. You hear him on radio. That is my son. Every night I listen to your show on the television. Every morning I read the newspaper to see if you are in it. But I never tell you this. Why? Because I am stupid. Because Italian father from old country, we don't say this thing. We think the boy will become soft if we say I love you
or I am proud. We think the boy need to be tough, so we stay tough. But you were never soft, Dino. You were always strong. You didn't need me to be tough. You needed me to tell you I love you, and I didn't do it. That is my biggest regret. I want you to know, everything you do, I am proud. When you sing, I cry. When I see you on the television with Frank and Sammy, my heart is so full, I think it will break. You are the king, Dino. You are better than me, better than I ever dream. I am sorry I never tell you. I am sorry I make you think I don't care. I care so much it hurt. But I am old Italian man and I don't know how to say the word. Maybe you never find this letter. Maybe you sell the shop and never come here. But if you do find it, I want you to know, I love you. I always love you. From the first day you sing in this shop when you are little boy, I know you will be special. You are my son. You are my pride. You are my everything. I am sorry I wait too long to tell you. Your papa.
Dean read the letter 3 times, then 4, then 5. Each time the words hit him harder. His father had known. He'd known he should have said it. He'd known Dean needed to hear it. And he tried. He'd written this letter, but he'd left it hidden in a drawer in an abandoned barber shop, hoping Dean would find it someday. Someday came 3 weeks too late. What Dean never learned. There had been other letters. Gaetano had written his first letter to Dean in 1952 after watching him perform on the Colgate Comedy Hour. He'd sealed it, addressed it, even put a stamp on it. Then he'd torn it up. He doesn't need to hear this from me, Gaetano had told himself. He's doing fine without it. He wrote a second letter in 1959 after Dean's TV show became a hit. He'd actually mailed this one, but he'd addressed it to Dean's old apartment in New York. It was returned 3 weeks later, addressee unknown. Gaetano had kept the returned letter in his nightstand for 8 years before finally throwing it away. The third letter, the one Dean found, was written when Gaetano knew time was running out. This time he couldn't bring himself to mail it, too scared it would get lost again, too scared Dean wouldn't understand. So he left it where he'd always felt closest to his son, in the shop where little Dino used to sing. 3 hours later, Dean sat in that barber shop for 3 hours. He read every single piece of paper, every single note, and by the time he was finished, he understood. His father hadn't been ashamed of him. His father had been so overwhelmed with pride that he didn't know what to do with it. So he collected it, documented it, saved it, kept it close, but he'd never been able to give it to Dean. Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know how. The letters Dean wrote. When Dean flew back to Los Angeles, he went straight to his office and sat down at his desk. He pulled out a piece of paper and began to write. It was a letter to his children, all 7 of them. A letter telling them that he loved them, that he was proud of them, that they should never doubt it. A letter with all the words his father never said to him. But Dean didn't hide his letter. He gave copies to each of his children that week. He sat down with each one and said the words out loud. I love you. I'm proud of you. I believe in you. His daughter, Claudia, would later say, it was the first time my father ever said those words to me. I was 33 years old. The ripple effect. What nobody realized at the time was that Dean's funeral speech had been recorded by a local radio station. 3 days later, it aired on a program about famous residents of Steubenville. A factory worker named Joseph Santini heard it while driving home.
He pulled over to the side of the road and cried. That night, Joseph went home and told his 19-year-old son for the first time ever that he was proud of him. His son would later become a therapist specializing in father-son relationships. The radio recording was played 247 times over the next decade on various stations across the country. Nobody knows how many fathers it reached, how many conversations it started, how many I love yous it prompted. But the letters started arriving at Dean's house within weeks. Dear Mr. Martin, I heard your speech about your father. I called my dad for the first time in 5 years. Dear Dean, your story made me realize I've never told my son I'm proud of him. I did yesterday. Dean kept every single letter, over 3,000 of them by the time he died. The Barbershop, 1968 to 1995. Dean had the barbershop preserved exactly as it was. He paid the rent for the next 28 years until he died. Once a year, on his father's birthday, Dean would fly to Steubenville, go to that barbershop, sit in his father's old chair, and read through the clippings, and cry, and forgive, and remember. He never went alone. Each year, he brought one of his children, sometimes two. He'd show them the drawer, read them their grandfather's notes, tell them the story. This is what happens when you don't say the words, he'd tell them. Don't let this be you. His son, Ricci, visiting the shop in 1983, asked, Dad, why do you keep coming back here? Doesn't it just make you sad? Dean had looked at him for a long moment. No, it makes me remember what matters. Words matter, Ricci. The words we say, the words we don't say. This place reminds me to say them. Christmas morning, 1995. Dean Martin died in his sleep at his home in Beverly Hills. He was 78 years old. When his children found something in his wallet, worn and folded and refolded 1,000 times, but still there. It was his father's letter, and attached to it was a note Dean had written. Papa, I found your drawer. I found your love. I forgive you. Thank you for being proud of me. I love you, and I'm coming to see you soon. This time, we'll both say the words. Your son, Dino. The legacy. At Dean's funeral, his daughter, Diana, shared the story. She held up some of the clippings and read her grandfather's notes. She shared both letters, Gaetano's to Dean and Dean's to Gaetano. My father learned a hard lesson, she said. He learned that love isn't just about being present, it's about speaking. It's about saying the words, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. She looked out at the gathered mourners, celebrants, family, friends from 50 years in show business. My father spent the last 28 years of his life making sure no one else made his father's mistake. He said, I love you so often it became his signature. He told people he was proud of them. He spoke the words. She held up the worn letter. This letter destroyed my father when he found it, but it also saved him. It taught him what mattered, and he spent the rest of his life teaching others.
Today, Crocetti's Barbershop is a museum in Steubenville, Ohio. In a glass case is the drawer, still full of clippings, covered in Gaetano's handwritten notes. Next to it, framed on the wall, is his letter to Dean and Dean's letter back to him. Visitors stand in front of that case and cry because they understand. They think of their own fathers, their own children, their own words left unsaid. And sometimes they leave the museum and make a phone call.
They say the words they've been holding back. The museum keeps a guest book. In it, hundreds of entries that say the same thing. Called my dad after visiting. Told him I loved him. First time in 20 years. Went home and hugged my son. Said I was proud of him. He cried. Thank you for sharing this story. I won't wait anymore. The Parallel, a story from 2023. In 2023, a man named Marcus Chen died in San Francisco. He was 82 years old. His son, David, found a storage unit his father had been renting for 30 years. Inside were boxes and boxes of programs, articles, and photographs, all documenting David's career as a software engineer and entrepreneur. His father had never told him he was proud, but he'd saved everything. David posted about it on social media. The post went viral with millions of views. In the comments, thousands of people shared similar stories. My mom had a whole closet full of my report cards, awards, everything. Never told me she was proud. Found them after she died. My dad kept every newspaper article about my business. I thought he disapproved of me leaving the family company. He never said he was proud, but he saved everything. The pattern keeps repeating. Across generations, across cultures. Parents who can't say the words, children who never hear them, discoveries that come too late. The lesson. Dean Martin and Gaetano Crocetti taught us all something crucial. Don't hide your love in a drawer. Don't wait until it's too late. Say the words. Say them now. Say them while there's still time. Because the saddest words in any language aren't "I love you." They're "I should have told them." Gaetano Crocetti should have told his son he was proud, but he didn't know how. Dean Martin made sure his children never had to wonder. He said the words, every day, until the day he died. And that's the real legacy. Not the music, not the movies, not the fame. The words. The simple, powerful, life-changing words. I love you. I'm proud of you. You matter. Say them today, before it's too late. Before all that's left is a drawer full of clippings and a letter that arrived 3 weeks after goodbye.